Howdy, folks. Back to one of my recorded sessions. So I got to do a little bit of a shout out. Obviously, some people see this on my music page, but I've got my Aussie Local and Live page, and I've got to get my subscribers up. So if you go to that page, Aussie Local and Live on Facebook, please subscribe to it. It helps me a lot with some of the things I'm trying to do now. Before I bring my guest on tonight, a quick shout out for this weekend. I've got some gigs I'm doing. Friday, I'm going to be at the Grandview Hotel at Cleveland from 5 till 9. Saturday, got a couple of gigs happening. I'll be at the Koala Tavern from 12 to 3. Runaway Bay from 8 till 11 that evening. I'll be playing with Nik Phiilips, someone who I know pretty well. Sunday, I'm at the South Bank Beer Garden from 2 to 6. We're at South Bank there. It'll be a big day there for the eve of Australia Day. And on Australia Day, I'm at the Spring Lake Hotel from 3 to 6. So check those out if you could. That would be great. So I'm going to bring on our guest here today. Bring him on, and there we go. Technology, here I go. Here he is, Scotty Nicholson. How are you, mate?
Hey, folks. I'm great. Thanks, Nick. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Mate, we've known each other for a number of decades by now, I think, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not quite that old, but yes, it's a few decades.
Because when I first met you, mate, you were a fella run around with a gun on your hip and in cop cars and doing all that type of side of life, right?
Well, pretty much I used to wear a shoulder holster. Was my preferred position for my weapon. But yeah.
Mate, I don't think you were in uniform when I met you. You were doing in some other, were you detective or something like that? What was your position in the cops?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously I started off in uniform way back in 1985. I did 12 months, general duties. Then I became a motorbike cop for 4 years, which was, as a 21-year-old kid, was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I went north to Charters Towers. I ran a PCYC of the police youth club there, got heavily involved in the local community, and I got offered a promotion there, and my now ex-wife didn't want to stay there any longer, so we moved back down to Brisbane. I became a detective, and that's where I stayed for the next 20 years almost.
Right. My niece, she's 24. She graduates from the academy in 34 days or something. So she's gone from, she was doing stuff up here in Toowoomba with a lot of the youth and youth services and working with the troubled youth, and went from there into the coppers. And yeah, she's enjoying the whole thing of going through the academy at the moment. So all the best to her.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed my time at the PCYC up there, helping out the youth. There was a large Indigenous population, and I brought the boxing back into the PCYC, and
Oh, wow.
got maybe 20 kids used to come down and train with me. It was great.
Man, what you obviously will go through the jump where you went from police service into the music industry and journey and security and all things like that you've done since then. But mate, what was it that got you to the point where you sort of felt you had enough of being in the police and wanted to make a move on? What was there a particular reason for that?
No particular reason. Well, there was two reasons. One, my dad was a cop and he died when he was 60.
Right.
So I thought if I follow his path on genetics, then just to jump back, I'd been sort of touring with a few different bands, and I was working with a band from California called The Offspring, and they wanted me to go full time with them. And I just sort of thought, well, at that stage of my life, will I regret if I follow my father's footsteps and die at 60, lay on my deathbed thinking, gee, I should have traveled the world in private jets and stayed in 5-star hotels, or not. So it wasn't anything bad about the police. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I was good at it. And I just, wanted to see the world. And I did. I've been around the world. I don't even know how many times.
Yeah. Mate, was the stress level something that you had to manage in there in the police, or was it you're on top of that side of things?
Not for me. I just, every day was a new day.
Yep.
So obviously, you had a workload that was never ending, and so you had to keep on top of that. At times I wasn't that great at it, and other times I excelled in it. So it was one of those things. You do have your ups and downs, I guess. But in general, I was able to meet the deadlines and get everything done.
So, Matt,
So
when you're at the PCYC, did that have anything to you do with you getting involved in music and music production and things like that through that
no.
time?
So what happened? I went to school with a fellow that called Brian Avery,
Yep.
and Brian, we used to hang out from, I think, grade 8 through till about grade 10 when Brian left school, and he was in a band with his brother called Nightwolf back then, and Brian and I used to live in the same neighborhood, so we'd hang out nearly every afternoon, and uh, I just went out and did sound and lights for them one night, and Dave, his brother's like, "Oh, do you want to hang out with us and do that a lot?" And I said, "Yeah," and I was getting paid $5 a show, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And Nightwolf had Carl Lewis on the drums, Dave Avery on the bass, and Brian Avery on lead guitar. Now, back in the day, Carl Lewis was only 13, Brian was 15, and I'm pretty sure Dave was around 18 or 19. And Carl went on to drum for Savage Garden and then Bachelor Girl after that. At that particular time, Brian was such a good guitarist that at the Queensland Rock Awards, well, they've made a resurgence, but back in the day, the Queensland Rock Awards had some prestige, and Brian would win the best lead guitarist, and Keith Urban would always get the best rhythm guitarist. Because Brian was just a phenomenal player.
Yeah.
Still plays around the traps. And then Dave Avery went on with Bill Birch to write the song Get a Haircut and Get a Real Job, which George Thorogood was in Cairns walking through a hotel bar, and one of the bands up there that are friends with Dave was playing that tape in between their set. And George goes, "Hey, who wrote that song?" And well, as you all know, the rest is history. George recorded it, and that went on to become his only top 10 US hit.
Hey, quick commercial break. Big shout out to our sponsor for today's episode, which is me, Nik Phiilips. Look, I've got to thank myself so much. I couldn't be doing the show without me. And if you get a chance, check out the sponsor's website, www.nickphilips.com. Check out my music, my videos, my bio, all that stuff, and maybe contact me and book me for a gig. That would be great. But thanks, Nick, for your sponsorship. Back to the show.
Now, many years later, and just recently, when George was on tour with ZZ Top around Australia, actually the last 4 tours I think George has done, my brother has been his local tour manager. So, the connection, it's just, it's a small, funny world.
Mate, the power of the Redcliffe Peninsula, mate.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So, I've been, I went to the last few, and I've subsequently been sending George's manager some new songs that Dave's written, and we'll see how that all goes.
I bumped into Dave a while ago at I was loading stuff into the Full Moon, and he was finishing lunch there with some friends, and we just had a quick g'day and all that stuff because I hadn't seen him for a long, long time. It's certainly one of those legendary stories from our local industry.
Oh yeah, so, and this is what I tell any artist that ask me about stuff. I say, well, you're only 3 minutes away from superstardom, so you only need that 1 3-minute song, and away you go.
Of course, you need a lot of other things to fall in place around that 3-minute song, but that's, if you haven't got the 3-minute song, you got nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes it can just happen,
of course.
But yeah. So anyway, so I was doing sound for Nightwolf and lights, or pushing a few faders up and down, and then I got a job at the Redcliffe Leagues Club in the bar. So that was paying $20 a night. So I left and
You made the big time by then.
yeah, made the big time at the Redcliffe Leagues Club. Bunny Pierce, old Bunny, was my boss.
Yeah.
The famous fullback from Redcliffe. And I started as a glassy and worked my way up to running the Sunday night They used to have a disco up there Sunday night after the games, and I was just talking to somebody about that today. About the professional footballers of today, but back then, Redcliffe was in the Brisbane League, in the Queensland League, or Brisbane League, but we had like 7 players in the Australian side. Wally Fullerton-Smith, Brian Niebling, Red Canescu, Mark Murray, Mitch Brannan, Brad Tessman. I can't remember who else, but there was like, for a small Queensland or Brisbane side, you know, where we had such great players, and they would be up there on a Sunday, double double fisting, double parking the drinks, and on Wednesday running out into Lang Park playing for Australia. you're,
Yeah.
you're like, you just wouldn't have that these days.
No, mate. Well, I remember Sunday nights I'd be doing a Sunday night gig at like City Rowers, and you'd have the Bronco boys coming in there, and Alfie and all them, and mate, they were setting the pace on the drinks. That was for sure. There was like
Thank God there was no cameras back in those days.
exactly, and that's where you got to feel sorry for some of the lads these days, because I mean, obviously the spotlight's so much bigger, the money's so much bigger, and the pressure on them so much bigger. But at the same time, they're young lads too, and yeah, they do get some better counselling these days on how to manage things, and sometimes things go a bit wrong. But you know, it's the scrutiny of social media is so crazy, and the same thing happens in the music world too. It's like a lot of young artists coming through. Um, the expectations are a little bit different these days. Although music, you can get away with a lot more than if you're a sports star. I do think it's fair to say.
Oh yeah, definitely. But a lot of people have got to take care and be accountable for the things they say and do. Especially around their fans, and you know, obviously the Me Too movement's outed a few people for things that they've said and done, and so forth. So, you know, I mean, it's still it is a bit more tolerable, but uh, in the realm of the rock star image, but still, you know, nobody likes that stuff. So,
But mate, Redcliffe, it's so great the Dolphins are in the National League now. But even going back to those days, where you had even from the administration side, the times with people like Tosser Turner and
mm.
and Artie Beetson was tied in with Redcliffe in the history and everything. So as a club, I think it was one of the greatest things that happened that it got into the NRL, because it certainly was one of those clubs that was built from the grassroots.
Well, that's for sure, and it was a destination, as you say. Artie sort of came back, and they did the in 1980, I think it was the first state of origin,
Hmm.
and then he owned the Moreton Bay Hotel, and he played in the commercial league. I remember playing against him. I actually played for Deception Bay, I think, when I was
Oh,
19.
did you? You played against him?
Yeah, played against him, and I remember running in to tackle the great Artie Beetson, and it was a really surreal moment,
I
and,
could imagine.
there was, like, 6 of us hanging onto him, and he was still running, but
No,
but,
I did a few gigs at his pub, and it was like kind of the conversations were pretty short and swift with him. It was for
y
sure. He was a man of few words in the pub.
yeah, yeah, he was, he was like that, and then, of course, Johnny Sattler, had the
Yeah.
Redcliffe Hotel. I used to have a little bit to do with Johnny. At that stage, I'd owned some PAs, and a couple of the young Redcliffe fellas were running the Muso Jam, so I would take my PA down, and on a Wednesday night. So I sort of became friends with Johnny, and now I'm friends with his son Scotty through
Yeah.
different roads. But yeah, we had a couple of good old famous footballers who ran the pubs there, and obviously, as I said, Bunny Pierce. I remember I remember being Bunny made a comeback when I was there, and I was up on the hill there at Redcliffe, and somebody kicked the ball, and one of our guys dropped it, and of course, all the drunks from the pig pen there were yelling out and abusing their own player for dropping the ball. And then the bomb goes up, and Bunny's underneath it, and he drops it, and everybody goes, "Oh, Bunny, oh, it's okay." They were just really on Bunny's side and wanted to see him go well. and he did well. He was a bit older. I think he came back as captain coach, and
I
yeah.
remember
But anyway,
I remember Rupert McCall telling me about he'd often get involved in the Monday morning nudie runs after the grand finals and stuff like that were held in the club. And
yeah, I wasn't part of any of that, mate. I was only young. But
so, mate, from the football club to getting into, what came first? Was it production? Was it artist management? Was it security? What was the next step?
okay, so yeah, so I left Night Wolf, and I got that job, and then my dad was like, "Well, you can't, just be a barman all your life." So he filled out the forms for me to join the police when I was just before I turned 19,
Okay.
and sent them away. And next minute, I got a call up for an interview, and then a few months later, I was at the academy. Yeah, and yeah, it just sort of happened that way. But funnily enough, my father had passed away. I think the night before I went for my interview for the police,
Okay.
he had passed away, and so I was like, "Oh, will I do it? Will I not?" I wasn't too sure. And I thought, no, well, Dad had gone to that trouble, and so I went and did the interview, and obviously I must have passed because they accepted me, and yeah, I went over to the academy for 6 months, made some, and I mean, lifelong friends there, in close quarters for 6 months, just training and studying. Sort of a bit like boarding school, I guess, but yeah, it was a great time. And then I got sworn in. I went back to Redcliffe, where I sort of grew up, which was a bit tough. I remember I worked with one fella, Rod Fagg. He'd come in from out bush, and it was I think it was his first shift in Redcliffe, and he was working with me 4 to 12. We went to 9 jobs that night, and I knew everybody at all 9 jobs. There was a 2-vehicle traffic accident. I knew the drivers of both vehicles. We went to 3 noisy parties, which we were obviously invited to come in and have a beer. We went to a domestic. I knew the girl there. There was a break-in in her. Anyway, he came back and he told everybody, "I'm never working with him again. He just knows everybody in this place."
Yeah.
And it was, it was a blessing, and it was also tough because sometimes I had to give out tickets to people
But yeah,
that I
but
knew.
was that a common thing that they'd post people in their like home location, or was that just the luck of the draw with the way it went for you?
Well, it was funny because I know when they were reading out back then, or these days apparently, when you go to join up before you start training, they go, "We're going to send you here, Townsville,
Mm.
Cairns, wherever," because I think a lot of times they'd train people and they say, "Well, you're going to Cairns," and they go, "Well, I don't want to go to Cairns," and they would resign, and they'd think, "Well, they just," so now they tell them, but back then they didn't. And a lot of people that applied, grew up in Toowoomba, wanted to go back to Toowoomba, grew up in Townsville or Mackay, wanted to go there. They said, "Oh, look, we can't send you back." And they said to me, "Well, you're going to Redcliffe." I said, "I live there." And they looked it up. They said, "Oh, you live at Margate." I said, "Yeah, well,
Oh,
Margate's this side of the street, Redcliffe's that side of the street."
exactly.
But anyway, so, yeah, I went there, and it was, yeah, as I said, it was sort of tough, but also, if somebody was going to a job, I would go, "Oh, go down here." I could tell them. I knew every street in Redcliffe because, I just rode around as a kid on skateboards and push bikes, and I literally knew every street, and I had so much wealth of information that, that often put me in the operations room so I could just direct cars where to go without telling them,
Yeah,
if you look at the coordinates on the old street directory, it's Charlie 4. Um, yeah, I could give them landmarks and
yeah.
and so forth. Anyway,
I love the peninsula, and but we sort of lived at Sandgate, just on the other side of the bridge for about 14 years, and then for a few years been on the Redcliffe side of the bridge. And I love the community atmosphere there, and I love the wide streets. I love all those things about it, and still being not that far from the city. But mate, you would have seen some changes because going back 20, 30 years ago, so it was a bit more of had a rougher edge to the to the from the way that it was perceived from the city.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, look, I remember a friend of mine from the academy. He wanted to come down to Redcliffe, so I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." So he came down for the weekend, and when we got back, um, they said, "Oh, how is Redcliffe?" He goes, "Oh, it's a rough place. It's a rough place." And Nico's mates, my mates, Nico's mates, they're the roughest. He goes, all they wanted to do was fight people, and if there wasn't somebody to fight, then they would fight each other. Because I had some brothers, the there was some brothers, and I won't name them, but you know, and they were quite rough, yeah, that particular night, at the old Captain Cook's Tavern, they end up punching on with each other, three of them out of the four.
so was it true? Because I grew up around the Kedron sort of Grange area. That was in the 80s or 70s, late 70s, early 80s. That was like my stomping ground. And you'd hear about going out to Sandgate or Redcliffe, and there was like you'd hear about the Boondle Boys or the Sandgate Boys and all that stuff. Were those things just legendary, or were they true?
Oh, look, I think they were probably half legendary, half true.
Yep.
Um, in the fact, like back then we had the Myers brothers, the Vines brothers, the Devlin brothers. Um, there was another lot. There was sort of some tough families getting
Yeah.
around who weren't actually bad fellas, but they just they used to get into a lot of fights. But in saying that, they always, in my opinion anyway, or mostly, they always sort of had a fair fight. Like if they got in a fight with somebody and punched somebody twice and they weren't punching back, they just didn't keep punching them. They went, "Hey mate, you've had enough.
Yeah.
Are you good?" And most of the times they'd shake hands.
Yeah, and I
Um,
also too, having someone who's now lived in the area for quite some time, I got a lot of friends in that area who've grown up there, and they're really nice people. And you know that it was actually a pretty good family vibe to grow up in general. You sort of always
yeah,
had.
yeah,
It was
it
back
was.
in the days
Look,
where, like, going to playing in the pubs those days, whether it was a Captain Cook Tavern or the Country Club at Strathpine or
Homestead, Stratus.
Homestead, they were a lot rougher places because people drank a lot more back then. It was cheaper to
Mm.
drink, and that's what you did, and there was just that sort of rougher environment, but it was still if you didn't go looking for trouble, it didn't come finding you. It was like it was there if you wanted it.
No, no, that's right. And I got to say also, I remember once again doing a special at the football in uniform when I was, 20, 21,
Mhm.
whatever. I think, yeah, I would have been 20 then. And, yeah, there was a massive fight in the old pig pen. That's where the enclosed area where
Yeah.
they used to drink. And I'm talking 20 or 30 guys were just
Go for it.
blueing.
Yeah.
And I was there with two older sergeants. And I said, "Oh, are we going in?" And they go, "Oh, listen, son." And one said, "He's young." They said, "We'll wait for them to punch each other out and then we'll go in."
Yeah.
And there was members of the public looking at us like, "Aren't you going to do anything?" And I said, "Well, I'm going in." And I remember jumping the fence to get in there. Oh, and I looked around and all of my mates, the rough mates, go, "Nico, we got your back." And so I just went in and started throwing people, breaking the fight up. And somebody'd go to hit me, and next minute, boom, my mate had cracked them, and it was sort of, so it was
You
sort
had a
of good.
crew behind you.
Yeah, and within about, I would say under a minute, like this brawl was going for a good few minutes, and
Yeah.
with under a minute, I'd been able to break it up, but only because not because the other coppers were backing me up, because my mates were.
No. But I think that's a fair bit of psychology, mate. When they'd send coppers out to the country towns, you had to get your head around that. Because if
Yeah,
you're in a country town and there's only two or three coppers there and there's like a shitload of trouble going down, you got to have the locals on your side.
oh, 100%. And anyway, look, I like to think that I treat everybody fairly, even if sometimes I did have to give them a ticket or whatever, or deal with them in some way. I always felt that I treated them fairly. Some people may argue against that and say, "Well, no, you didn't," but I always thought I did anyway. So
Yeah. And I've done a couple of interviews on my little podcast here with a couple of coppers, and there's some really great stories there I've told. And I'm not going to dwell too much on your side of the police life because you saw the light and came into the music world.
Well, just
Yeah,
before
you evolved, if I can put it that way.
we started this podcast, you're talking about Keith Banks. Well, in his second book, you'll see there's a big paragraph about me in there. I think "Gun to the Head" is that the name of that book, and it's a good read. It's a true story when Keith was working undercover
Well,
back in the day.
for people who don't know, look at some of the back episodes, and Keith he clarified. I was saying he was Queensland's most decorated cop. He said he was one of Queensland's most decorated one. He wanted to clarify that.
Well, let me tell you this: he's won 2 medal, and he won't sort of brag about this. He's won 2 Medal of Valor awards, which is the highest award that you can win. One was for Operation Flashdance back on the 29th of May, 1989, with the death of Peter Kidd, who was they were in this, well, back then. So just for instance, let's call it the SWAT team. They were in the SWAT team, and they did a raid on a bank robber, and Peter was unfortunately shot and killed. And Keith and another chap, Steve Grant, brought the offender to well, basically they shot him and he died as well. And then Keith disarmed the guy at the MLC building who had a bomb strapped to him. So he won 2 Medal of Valor awards for that. Now, the only other policeman to win 2 Medal of Valor awards was in 1901 and 1902.
Oh, wow.
So when you say Keith was one of the most decorated, yeah, there's another guy.
He's a humble man in saying that, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And I just mentioned to people watching this too, the other copper I did the show with was a guy called Todd McGuire, and Todd's just released his book recently called Donnie, an undercover cop with a death wish. And it's a book I hope really gets made into a movie because there's so many interesting stories there. And Toddy was, like Scotty, someone he'd come out and watch me play, and we got to know each other through music and things like that in those days. And whereas Scott was more in the industry, Toddy was sort of a punter, a fan at the gigs, and I was actually watched him go through a lot of his undercover work, and nights he was working, he'd give me a wink and a nod, and I knew he was getting messed up a fair bit during that time. But he's come out of it and has an amazing story to tell. So check that one out. Go back and look at the episodes. And while you're there, please subscribe to my channel, guys, or follow if you're on. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, because I eventually might just be doing this on YouTube. But if you go to the Facebook Aussie Local and Live page, please follow it, because I've got to get my people following me up on that page so I can start doing live streams on that channel. So just do that. So, mate, can we jump forward to your story through the police, and you became full-time in the music industry?
Okay, so it morphed in. So what happened was back in back in the day, I was also working undercover.
Right.
So I had long hair, and it was like back in my 15-year-old days with Nightwolf, and I was working up in Cairns doing a job up there for about 7 months. Anyway, I used to go to this place on a Wednesday night called Gypsy D's, and I'd meet another undercover agent who, we weren't supposed to interact with each other, because if one of us got blown, the other one could have their identity blown as well. But, every now and then you've got to have a friendly face to chat with and say, hey, this happened. How did you do that? Or this happened, or watch out for this person, or this person carries a gun, all this intel that, we would just sort of chat. Anyway, there was a band there called the Funky Love Tank, and they were from Melbourne. They had a residency at this place called Gypsy D's. And so for a month, I'd go there and get quite inebriated, having a good time.
Yeah.
And also, you get to, your face gets to be seen around town, and
become more trusted.
People, oh yeah, I've seen you around.
Yeah.
I mean, we were going after not just your dime stuff. We were going after major importers of heroin and so forth. So, I mean, it was quite, it was quite the time. Would I ever do it again? Probably not. But at the time, it was
a gig.
it was a gig, and I had a lot of fun. Anyway, so this band was there, and I would see them, but became friends with them pretty much. And my name, I had a covert name called Jack, and because I was there, they would sort of do a month, and then they'd go away for 3 months touring, and then they'd come back. So I met them over 2 months over the 7-month period, and about 6 or 7 months after the job closed down, I had to go back for court, and lo and behold, they were there anyway. So we got talking. I said, "Oh, look, my name's not Jack, and I'm not really a courier driver. This is me." And they're like, "Oh, thank God, because we really liked you, but we thought you were a drug dealer, so we didn't want anything to do with you." And anyway, so that was that, and I was up there for court, and they said, "Oh, look, we're thinking of coming down to Brisbane. Can do you know anybody where we could get a show?" I said, "Oh, leave it with me." So I got their number, and I came back down to Brisbane, and I rang him up about a week later. I said, "Look, I've got you working 7 nights a week for 3 months. From this date on, can you come down and do it?" And they're like, "How did you get all those gigs?" I said, I just asked around. Anyway, so they came down in their school bus. They were doing it, and they camped out front of my place in their school bus, and I had them working 7 nights a week. And then they said, "Oh, can you manage us?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, why not? Something to do." Because at that stage, I just, sadly, undercover work breaks up a lot of marriages because you're away a lot, and so forth. So I thought, well, I've got a bit of time. And so, I started managing them way back when. And then they sent me over to China to go to a record company thing that Q Music, it was called Mid-Am. Q
Yep.
Music had organized a Queensland booth. And so I went over and I sold some deals with them. I had no idea. I was just, winging it. But I'd come
What
out
year
of
was this about?
that was 1998.
Yeah, okay.
So I'd come out of undercover work, and I was still, pretty smooth talking, and thought that I was pretty good. Anyway, so I did that, and then we went to Europe to try and get them some gigs. Once again, had no idea about anything, but just had a blast, and managed them for quite a few years. In fact, that's 1998. So Steve, the lead singer, there was Steve and his brother, brother B, on drums, and Steve was guitar. Steve was in a band called Go 101, which had a couple of top 10 hits back in the, I guess, early, it was sometime in the 80s, and I'm still friends with, I haven't seen brother B for a long time, but Nick, the bass player, and Stevie Love, the guitarist / lead singer, we still communicate probably once a month. So we remain friends. Then I did. My brother was in the music industry, and back in, once again, 1998, AC/DC and Michael Jackson were in town on the same time, and they needed somebody who had a bus license to drive Michael Jackson's band around. And my brother rang the transport coordinator, who rang me, and he said, "Oh, so I've got a gig doing that." And he goes, "Oh, if you ever want to do this again, let me know." I said, "Yeah, it was fun, bit of drinking change." And then the next gig I got was Gloria Estefan, and I was with
Just going
Gloria.
back to that 98 gig, I'm pretty sure I remember. Who was the female percussionist that played with him? Was she on that tour?
With Michael Jackson. Oh,
Yeah. Sheila E. or something, or Sheila E. or...
yeah.
I just remember a couple of them. We were playing down at Alice's nightclub, and a couple of them came down there from his band one night. And
Yeah,
that
right.
seems it like it lines up about that time. Were you getting to socialize with people doing that stuff at that time that you were driving around?
What, the band or?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, and especially Gloria Estefan was my next job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, she had Gloria Estefan and the Miami Heat Machine.
Yeah.
She had a couple of Latino girl had a couple of #1 hits around the world.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was with her for like 4 days. She's like, "Hey, can you come to Japan with me on Monday?" I said, "What for?" She said, "Oh, I just like having you around." And she had her own security detail.
Right.
Um, I said, "Oh, you got Simon." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, but, we'd love to have you." And
Did
I
she
said,
know
"Oh,
you're
no."
an ex-copper?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
So I told them, and I was with her for about 5 days, and, yeah, she, I played her the Funky Love Tank CD.
Sell,
Anyway,
sell, sell, mate. Sell, sell,
yeah,
sell.
I got straight into it. I probably wouldn't do that these days, although I was with, Chris Martin from Coldplay once. We went surfing with Ricky Martin, sorry,
As
not
you
Ricky
do.
Martin. We went surfing with Kelly Slater, and, anyway, and Ian Hogg from Powderfinger came, and that's how I'd sort of met Hoggy, but didn't know him.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're all down the beach, and then Chris Martin goes, "Hey, Scotty, have you got any local bands that, you know, you could play me? I wanna listen to some local music." And funnily enough, one of my friends, Nick Tropiano from down in Sydney, was managing a band called Regular John, and he sent me their, CD up, and I had it in the car, and he loved it. So, sometimes I can get it, but once again, when I have been on tour with, Green Day or The Offspring or Jack Johnson, whatever, people give me CDs, music all the time. And I
Yep.
try and have a listen to it,
Yep.
but it's sometimes it's almost impossible, because I might get 30 CDs back in the day on a tour, and there's just no way that I could have a listen. But sometimes I would, and sometimes I'd play that to whatever artist I was with as well.
And mate, Scotty, this is one of my reasons for doing this little chat podcast thing I'm doing is I'm trying to capture these local stories. And look, around town, so many people know you. So many people in the industry know you of Scott Nicholson. A lot of them don't know your story and the type of things you've done, the people you've worked with, the things you've done hanging around with, the connections you have, all that stuff. And what I'm trying to do with this little thing is have something where you can show people when appropriate or people can have a look at it and they can actually hear some of the things you've done. So I've got a few naive questions for you because I know you've hung out with a lot of these famous people, whether it's security or for driving them, or you've had these relationships, which I imagine quite a few of them turn into friend relationships.
Oh, yeah.
When these famous people, I think you've had the advantage in many ways of meeting these people as being part of their team and not being an, a record industry person or a punter person. You're like in that kind of inner circle team. Most of the people even though they're famous, how have you found them on a personal level when you get to hang out in a group, in a circle? Are they, like, standoffish? Most of them pretty comfortable to get on with? Is there, like what I think most punters or most normal people would think they'd be kind of living in their own little bubble world, but my experience, I found a lot of people in that sort of space that's their life. They're very normal when it comes down to it. What's your experience been?
Oh, look, you're 100% right. Everybody's just a normal person. However, when they're on tour, they go into a whole different mindset because, when they're at home, they've got to go and do the groceries and pick the kids up from school and do whatever. But when they're on tour, they have a whole team that does everything. Hey, can I get that bag for you? Yeah, I'll get that sent up to your room. In general, they don't really have to do anything. I mean, a couple of years ago, I did personal security for Billie Eilish, and we were flying around on private jets, around Australia, New Zealand, and Asia. And we jumped on the plane, and immigration. We were somewhere in Asia, I can't remember. We jumped on the plane, and I mean, all she had to do was literally walk down the elevator with me and jump in the car. We would then drive to the red carpet on the tarmac, jump on the plane. Immigration would come in and do our thing. She just looked at me. She said, "Scotty, even at this level, I'm tired." And I mean, it's very, even though you'll have somebody doing all that stuff for you, it just takes its toll on you. And but yeah, most people are very. You know, they're just down to earth and normal people.
From what
And
you've told me, Ed Sheeran was pretty down to earth to work with, correct?
Ed was great to work with. I remember we went to a bar, and I think we made the front page of the Courier Mail. But anyway, we're in the bar, and his crew had got there earlier. Now, bearing in mind, he's just a solo artist. So it's not like he's got the band that he can go, hey, let's go and hang out. It's just him. And so he had a travel buddy that used to travel with him. Anyway, they got in. He used to like hanging out with the crew because they were his band, I guess, so to speak. And we went to the Embassy Hotel down there in Brisbane in Edward Street, and the crew were having a few beers. I think it was a Sunday night. Anyway, the young kid, the barman, who's the young kid there, didn't realize that Ed Sheeran was Ed Sheeran. I mean, he was sort of on the, we had 3 sold out shows at the River Stage, so 30,000 people were coming to see him.
Yeah.
But the kid didn't know who he was. Anyway, he goes, "Oh, how you doing, mate?" "Oh, I just broke up with my girlfriend of 3 years." He was only a young kid, about 19. And it's like, "Oh, that's no good." He goes, "Oh, yeah." Anyway, so they're having, and as Ed would go back and get another beer, they would talk about, the girlfriend, the breakup, and how he's handling it and all that. And then Ed goes, "Do you know who I am?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "Oh, well, my name's Ed Sheeran. I'm a singer." And he goes, "Oh," and then the penny clicked that it was him. He goes, "I want you and, some of your friends to come along and come to my show." So I organized backstage passes for this kid, and he came and he went backstage. And before the show, Ed said, "I want to meet him." And so we were there, and it's like, take some photos, and I want to get this. He goes, "Because I want you to send them to your ex-girlfriend saying this could have been you."
I have to say,
But really, looked after this kid and made him
really.
just like he was really depressed, and just made him feel like $1 million a couple of days later.
Yeah, my family and I, we followed Ed from, I think the first time we saw him was when he was a real kid and doing that thing at the Queen's Jubilee, whatever it was. And first time we saw him on telly really
I
here.
think the first time he came to Brisbane, he was at the Black Bear Lodge.
Right. Yep. Yep.
200
And
people.
my son Beck organised some tickets for us to as gifts to go and see that last tour he did at Suncorp Stadium, where he did 3 in a row at 65,000 people. And I got to say, man, as you know, I've had my band background, but most of my life's been playing solo guitar and just one person on stage with a guitar doing what you do. You got to connect with people. You got to find your way to do it. And his master craftsman skills in doing that, was the best concert I've ever seen. He had a band on stage for about 3 songs. The rest of it was just him doing his thing, obviously with his pedals and everything else. Rotating stage, he was moving all the time around this stage, but just one person in front of 65,000 people. It's like, I grew up listening to your James Taylor, your Jackson Browns, your your Neil Youngs, these kind of people. You could break down to a solo if you wanted to, but I've never seen a master craftsman do it as one solo person as what Ed did. So it was just, so in awe of all the stuff he's done.
But I have worked with James Taylor, Jackson Brown, and Neil Young.
Yeah, all of them, have you?
Yeah.
How'd you find James? I mean, James was probably my first big influence. Going through school, I had a music teacher she'd introduced us as part of our music stuff. She was such a cool teacher to like Carole King and James Taylor, and they were the first people we really studied. And my guitar playing is based around a lot of James Taylor's playing because that was my first influence. And I just found James Taylor as a songwriter to be, even though his hits were from his early years, his biggest hits from his early years, the albums he's produced on and on, they haven't had the same radio play, the same exposure, but the songs are just as good all the way through his career. He's had this consistency.
I think I did it. And once again, when I say I worked with him, I just drove him around for a couple of days, whatever. Him and Carole King, back in the day.
You did that tour, right? Great.
That
I got
tour,
tickets from my mum and dad to see that, yeah.
And then I think that was at the River Stage. I'm pretty sure. And then
I think
Kerry
Entertainment Centre, I think they did theirs.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Maybe I did another one with Carol at the River Stage. And then my brother Kerry just toured with him not long ago, a couple of years ago when he came out.
I did on the green. Well, on the green
Yeah,
at
Day on the Green.
Ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that concert. Yeah, I think I've seen him 7 times live now. Going back to Expo.
Yeah,
Um,
I've seen him
right.
maybe three or four. I can't remember. Something like that. And then Neil Young, Neil and I got on really well. And that was when he did the Big Day Out. And then we did the Brisbane Entertainment Centre. And then they came to me and said, "Oh, look, Neil wants you to go on around the rest of the world with him." But at that stage, I'd started doing dignitary protection within the police for the government.
Right.
So I was looking after world leaders. And I was on the operational order for Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister, and she was coming to Brisbane. I said, I can't. I'm on the Prime Minister's team on Tuesday. And they go, "Yeah, but Neil Young wants you to go on tour with him." I go, "Yeah, but the Prime Minister is coming to town and I'm on the thing. It's not like I can just go sick." you know, maybe if I wasn't on that operational order, I probably could have got the time off and,
My Julie Gillard story was I did a lot of stuff in China, as you know,
yeah,
and
yes.
I was over there when Julie Gillard went over there and did the tour, and she actually was very highly respected over there by the Chinese government side of things. But I was doing a lot of stuff there for the Australian Embassy and doing concerts, and we actually got her staff quite terpsed up one night and had a lot of fun with them, and they were going to help us out with this and that. But then when she came back to Australia, it was like that week after that Kevin Rudd overthrew her again, and it was all turmoil and everything. But it was interesting watching those delegations on tour in a place like China because they were really much out of their depth into how to get around the place, what to do, and what places to go. And it was actually fun to actually be able to show them a good time because the club we took them to was owned by one of China's really big stars who a friend of mine knew well, and we were able to treat them really well, make sure everyone was looked after properly, and there was no bullshit going on. It was great.
Yeah. And, that's the great thing. And I must admit, I've traveled many times around the world and if I go to, Rio with some band and then I go back with somebody else and then I can go, "Hey, I know the guy who owns this place, let's go there." And they go, "Well, how do you know him?" I said, "Oh, I met him, a couple of years, or I met him in Europe." Like, some of the fans of the people, they just travel the world and follow them. And
Yeah.
obviously they, some of them are a bit wealthy and that's why they can do it. And so then when I go to, New Orleans or Rio de Janeiro or Paris, people go, "Oh, Scotty, you're in town, coming here." And I can take the band.
Without going into details, did you ever have to do actually security detail with any of the artists at all?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
I was the entertainment coordinator.
Yeah, cool.
No, of course I did. I did all my advances. I had everything sorted out. I used to
Right.
go to the venue. I remember, Dexter from the Offspring. The band would go down. Sometimes I'd go down with them, and then depending on how far away the hotel was to the venue, if it was a long way, I wouldn't go. But uh, we would get there, and he would be getting all of his stuff ready. I would run in and run around and go, "Here's the dressing room. Here's the stage. Here's the catering. Here's this. Here's that." And I would come back out, and he would be just getting ready to get out of the car, and I'd walk in, and he'd look at me, and I'd take him straight to his dressing room. He'd go, "Did you come down here before?" I go, "No." He goes, "How did you know where to go?" I said, "I just ran in while you're getting ready." Like, so it wasn't so much did I ever have to, like, sometimes if people got on
It
stage,
wasn't like dignity security. It was more like being assistant to the artist on the spot.
sort of, but not really. Yeah,
Mm.
times that people would come. I remember one artist he had stalkers, who threatened to kidnap their kids, and so I'd be on high alert. Now, when I would say, did we have to do security? Well, might have 30,000 kids in the audience that
Yeah.
the band are grown ass men. They can look after themselves. But I got 30,000 kids that could get injured, trampled, killed. When I was working with Justin Bieber, a lot of them were 10, 12-year-old girls. So, I had to look out for their safety and also that there may have been predators,
Yeah. You had to
in
use
amongst the
your copper
audience.
smart. You had to bring in your copper smarts.
Yeah. I had so, did I ever get into wild punch ups or whatever? A lot of times I would have to break up fights between local security in the pit, especially on the festivals. They'd be in there for 6 hours catching kids coming over the barricade with livelier bands
Yeah.
like Green
They're
Day or
tired, they're worn out, and shit's going on around them.
yeah, and all of a sudden some kid comes over and their foot accidentally kicks the guard in the face and he loses his temper and bang, bang, bang. And I would have to jump down off stage and, really almost get into a fight with the guards. I remember one time in Brazil, um, the barricade broke and I had I had to stop the thing because it was just shattered and somebody was certainly going to get badly injured, if not killed. And so I stopped the concert, and it was probably only 12,000 people there or whatever. But the local police, they started getting restless, and the police chief tells me, "You've got to get them back on. Send the band." I'm like, "No, not until we fix it." So him and I are having an argument, and then I've got my little earpiece in, and the tour manager goes, "Hey, Scotty, I don't want you to get alarmed, man, but you got 6 guns trained at your head right now." And so I
Yeah.
stopped and I looked around. I'm like, Jesus. Okay, so
Here comes
and
the
then I'm
band.
yeah, no, I know. I'm thinking to myself, I'm in a third world country talking to some guy that doesn't understand English, and I got 6 guns pointed at me. They're going to take me away, do whatever, and then they'll go, "Well, what happened to Scotty?" Well, I don't know. We let him go, and I guess he just never came back. So
Yeah.
you got to have your wits about you and your negotiation skills for sure,
So,
because
mate,
they're
people listening, this will, yeah, we've covered the point pretty well, but there's so many artists you work with we could talk about, which is, been an amazing part of your journey. But also, you've taken a lot of that knowledge that you've learned from being around those artists, being around the industry, being around the coppers, having that sort of sense of everything around you, how the world really works. And you've taken the time to work with a lot of indie artists, help develop other artists coming through, work on developing their craft.
yep. I'm actually working with a young kid now. He's 15. I went out to Eden's Hill the other week. One of my friends has some children who go to Nudgee College, and Pete Murray
Mhm.
was
A nudgy boy.
and my Nudgee boy, and he was doing a fundraiser for them. And her husband couldn't make it. She's like, "Hey, I've got this ticket. Will you come out?" I don't know. Maybe she knew I'm friends with Pete Murray, so um, and it was quite funny because I get out of the car in the car park and I hear, "Hey, Scotty," and I'm looking over and Pete was just rocking up. So it was quite funny. But anyway, and then while I was there, this young kid who also goes to Nudgee was one of the openers. And I was talking to my group of friends and they go, "Hey, check this young kid out. He's pretty good." And so yeah, I looked over and had a listen to him. And so his name is Ethan, Ethan, Dahl, Dahl. If you go to the.ethan.dahl on TikTok, his mum runs the account. It's a
Mhm.
business account and it just puts music clips up. But, we put one up the other day and it's got 350,000 hits in 10 days.
But mate,
So,
what are that's kind of a bit of a rare story. What
mm,
are the main challenges you've seen over the years that indie artists coming through have faced? Obviously, to me, I'm a big believer, even going back to the 80s, 90s, mate, when there were a lot more, not so much indie artists, but a lot of pub performers like you, Keith Urbans, um, people like that. Your Powderfinger Boys were, started doing cover band stuff at the beginning, all that thing. And turning up and doing those gigs were your way you made your money while you were working on your original stuff.
mm,
We did have different channels back in those days. If you got product to go out with a label like a Mushroom or a BMG or a Sony, you knew that you at least had a pathway to market. If you didn't get those, you could still at least sell CDs. You could live off selling merchandise and doing gigs and doing side gigs. We've kind of lost a lot of all those things out of the game. The labels don't really work the way they used to as far as R&D and how they develop artists. You really got to develop yourself online first these days. We don't have the ability to sell CDs like we used to have, which, if as an indie artist, if you could sell 2,000 CDs over a year at, $15 a CD, there's 30 grand on top of your earning capacity for the year. Now with streaming, if you're an indie artist, and you're getting 30,000 streams a year, you're probably getting enough for a couple of cups of coffee. That's about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
If that, exactly. Um, but from your position, having hung around people, the big end of the game, seeing how that works to a degree, work with indie artists. What's your assessment or advice to people, or your thoughts on where the game is now? I speak to some people who just throw their hands up and say our industry's over. I don't believe that personally. I'll put my thought out there first. I think people are listening to more music than ever before. More music is being consumed. We've lost the structure of models on how indie artists make their money, but we have to rediscover them and redefine them and rebuild them, is my opinion. So I just throw that out there first. Over to you, mate. What's your opinion on where we're at in not with the big artists, because there's a lot of things going with that, but the indie artists who to me are the grassroots. The If you don't have that fertile ground of emerging artists, you got nothing.
Yeah. Look, certainly it's a lot tougher, and as you say, back in the day, you might go to Sony and they'll say, "Well, here's $5,000 as development deal, and go and record 2 songs, and if they're any good, we'll see how they go, and we'll present them to radio. If they're not any good, well, you know, we've just blown 5 grand, which is probably an office party for them back in those
Yeah,
days."
and you make up out of Madonna sales. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
yeah.
So, depending on where you're at, and there's been plenty of great indie artists, John Butler, has been one. The Parkway Drive guys have, you know, they've been touring the world as John Butler has, and um, there's plenty of others that have sort of really made it in the indie world, but once again, they had the right song at the right time. Triple J was a big help back in the day. These days, is Triple J as relevant as it was then? Possibly not. Um, and but it's also so much easier. Like at the moment, I not made contact, with some of the heads of radio around Australia and New Zealand, and I can email songs to them, and and they will reply to me, "Hey, I like that. We're going to play it," or "Hey, it's not really for us." But you know, uh, I know there's some radio pluggers that do that for a living that would like to be getting contact back from the people that contact me back, and I don't know why. Some of them I've met, and some of them I haven't. But maybe it's the way I word my emails. I'm not too sure, but
Well, no, I think you've got personal relationships that you can draw on, because I did an interview here with Drew Chapman, who's a friend of mine, and Drew was a music manager for years for Triple M, um, you know, program manager at different channels, very senior up in that whole network. And when we were chatting, we were just saying, like, because I'm back in my earlier days, I actually, as an indie artist, I think I'm the only, he thought I was probably the only indie artist in Australia that's had 3 songs playlisted on the Austereo network that were indie releases. I had my song Bleeding Valentine, the song Come Back Soon, which I did for the Australian Defence Force and everything else in East Timor. And I had my, with Ripper McCall, my Forever Queensland State of Origin song. So they were
other
songs with a
Redcliffe boy.
twist. Exactly, mine, another Redcliffe boy. But, you could, it was possible back then for an indie artist with a twist on it, or you put it with a program or whatever, to get your songs
Mm.
on off stereo. Drew said, yeah, that would never happen now because it's all centralized programming from Sydney or Melbourne, wherever that is, and the regionals can't really make up those decisions. If you get a response from somebody that the pluggers aren't getting, it's probably because you've got those local relationships. But I'm not sure whether radio is radio even a thing in making artists these days? Like, you talk about that young artist you're talking to that's got, what, 350,000 streams, whatever. Does it all come back to those streams as far as profile, rather than
Yeah, pretty
radio, rather
much
than
on
video?
TikTok and stuff like that. And things where you explode on TikTok or Instagram, you have a viral thing, a viral song go off. Well, then, that does grab the attention of promoters, agents, radio people, other bands and so forth. So it's one of those things where people don't really like to go, "Oh, well, yeah, I don't want to be a social media network success, but in reality, it depends on why you're doing the music. You know, if you're doing music because you want to record your songs and get them out there for one or a million people to listen to, but if only one person listens to it, you are extremely happy because you know you've changed and you could change that person's life with your one song. I'm sure that some of your songs have moved people and actually changed the direction of their life for the better. So
Absolutely, man. I've had numerous people come up to me and say that they met their partner or their wife because of my gigs, or I've had people come up and ask me to perform some of my songs at a funeral or things like that. And while I never had that song that went to the top of the charts, well, I had one in China, but a different story there. But as far as like the Western commercial world, I haven't. Um, the fact that you actually can write your songs and touch, maybe three or 400, 1,000 people with what you're doing in a really emotional way is something that very few people in any career get to do. And that's actually a real pleasure and a joy, you know?
yeah, I mean, I remember standing on the stage in Leeds, I think, or maybe it was Reading. It was Leeds in 2011 with the Offspring, and they were the last song was la 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 la, and the crowd started bouncing up. 70,000 people bouncing up and down, and they started singing. Now I'm on stage with the band, like just next to the bass player, pretty much off stage, but on stage, with them. And the breath of the 70,000 people was thumping me in the chest as they were singing along. And I honestly, I got sort of shackles going up the back of my neck. I'm like, holy moly.
I mean,
How, what a,
that's in a
what
big
a rush.
stadium like that. But also, if you're in a smaller room with 300 people and they're doing that same thing, I got to tell you, the vibe is exactly the same. It's
Just as
such a
powerful.
powerful thing.
That's what I'm talking about. But I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, what a rush this is." And then I thought to myself, how must the band be feeling? Because like I was only 3 feet away, but people weren't focusing on me, they were focusing on the band. I thought, how must the band feel at this? And then I thought, how must Dexter feel? Because he wrote the song, and when they come off stage, pardon me, how the like, the length of time for them to come down from that euphoric high was just I mean, I would spend that time with them,
It's
but,
got the magic amount music is too. If you go to like the Carole King, James Taylor thing, when they're on stage doing their version together of You've Got a Friend, which they both had a hit with,
mm,
and you've got maybe 15,000 people in the like an entertainment center, and everyone's quietly singing that along with their eyes closed. I'm almost crying thinking about that experience. You're sharing
I
that emotion with them on that song they wrote. You can't put a price on that.
well, I'm managing another band called Ash and Moon, which is, Gary Beers from In Excess.
Mhm.
He's got a band over in LA with Toby Rand from, a Melbourne band called Juke Cartel, another guy, Yohai Portal, and, we roped Jackie Barnes, Jimmy's son, into, doing the drums for us. Jackie and I are sort of good friends, so, um
Jackie gets dragged into a lot of things by the sound of it.
Oh, yes. Well, obviously he plays drums for Jimmy. He plays with Lockie,
I've had so many people talking up Jackie, and that's just like as far as like, oh, Jackie's great.
mate, what a sweet guy he is. I mean, and just a powerhouse on the drums. But anyway, I bought them out uh, last year and we did a little run around Australia. Unfortunately, it was when the cyclone was on. We had a few gigs got cancelled, and but anyway, we did a show at the Glenmore Hotel on the rooftop bar down in Sydney, overlooking the Opera House in the Sydney Harbour. We teamed up with Young Henrys and we had beers with beers, and they did an acoustic song of "Tear Us Apart," "Never Tear Us Apart," and once again there was because it was a sort of a not really a competition, but it was a promotional thing with Young Henrys. So there was only about 75 people on this little bar thing, and my God, just the emotion, the raw emotion of that was unbelievable
Mhm.
as well, and there was only 75 people.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the power of a song. I mean, I did the third New Year's Eve in a row with myself and Tuffy up at the full moon on this last New Year's Eve. And mate, Nick and Tuffy gigs, so we're doing that cover stuff, we're doing all that. But it's such a pleasure. Yeah, obviously, I'd love to be up there singing all songs off my album. That ain't
Just
going to
getting back
happen
to
in
that,
that
I
situation.
I
Hey,
took I took Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran to see Tuffy at the Exchange Hotel one night. Anyway,
right. How do you handle it?
well, Tuffy didn't even realize who it was. You know, he was just talking to me in his break, and yeah, it was Simon Le Bon from Duran
Hey,
Duran.
those things happen. I'll give you one. My most embarrassing moment of that is on my first trip to Los Angeles back in, that would have been, I think it was 87. And my producer mate I was working with, Adam Smalley, he had a friend of his called Brian Toshi. And Brian, have you seen the Police Academy movies?
Mm,
Yeah,
of
the
course.
Japanese guy in it. Yeah,
Yeah,
the Japanese. Yeah,
yeah.
that's Brian. But Brian was actually a kid star in LA from a thing called Space Cadets. So he grew up in LA and he knew everybody. And Adam knew everybody because he grew up too. And his dad was an orchestrator and had orchestrated like Last of the Mohicans and all stuff like that. So they all knew these people everywhere we went. Anyway, and everywhere we went, we would meet like Eddie Van Halen or John Hurt, or we got to meet Robin Williams, all these people they just all knew. And when I say met, once again, it was like I got to shake hands and have like 3 or 4 sentences with these people, and that was it. There was one lunch we had where we were sitting there, and we were at our table, and these people were brought in, and one was Mel Gibson's agent, and she sat down first, and she was like doing the thing. Oh, you're so good looking. You should, yeah, doing all that stuff, and I'm like, yeah. But then this husband and wife sat down, and the husband had a bandana on his head, and I didn't get their name. But we're sitting there chatting, and we're talking about, oh, yeah, from Australia. Oh, I've been to Australia, yada, yada, all this stuff, everything else. We chatted for about 10 minutes, and then their table became free, so they left. And my mate Adam's sitting there like as white as a ghost. He said, you know who that was? I said, mate, I didn't get his name. I was sitting there for 10 minutes talking to Bernie Taupin, Elton John's partner writer. And it was just like we were mates at a bar, just having a chat and a drink and everything. And they went to their table and they were so nice and all that. And it was just one of those things you go, I'm actually probably glad I didn't know who it was at the time, because I would have had preconceptions on, am I saying the right thing? We just had a great chat for 10 minutes. He would never remember me. I will always remember that moment. It was so cool. But Scotty, I know you've got to work tomorrow, mate, and all that, and I really appreciate your time in doing this, because you've got so many stories, and maybe we can do a follow-up, because there'll probably be things after this we'll say, oh, we should have spoken about that, we should have spoken about this, and I want to get multiple interviews done with people. But
Mm.
going where we're from today, I really appreciate, I know the energy you put into helping people in this industry, right? I've seen it firsthand. I know what you do and your love for the game and everything else. But if we were just to tie up now and I say, Scotty, is there a message you'd like to put out there for our industry and artists coming through from what you've seen on what you would like your Scott Nicholson message to be at this point in time? Is there anything I haven't mentioned or spoken about that you'd like to say?
Okay, well, I always tell artists you're only 3 minutes away from superstardom. So,
Mhm.
you can write a song, a 3-minute song, and that can change your life forever. Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. But, I'm sure Gautier is sick of hearing, somebody I used to know, but that
Probably
song.
not when he's counting his bank account, probably not.
Exactly. Um, and the other thing I always tell them is, if say your music career is like being a 100-meter runner, and you're in the Olympic finals for the 100 meters, and you do your race, you come last, you come eighth in the 100-meter, but you've made the finals, so you're up there with the best in the world, but you're 4/100ths of a second away from that gold medal. Well, then you've got to train 6 hours a day, uh, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for 4 years for you to have a shot and win that gold medal. And that's to shave 4/100ths of a second off. So it's a lot of hard work sometimes to get where you've got to go. Sometimes it can be, lucky that George Thorogood is walking through a bar and hears your song and records it, and you make some money. But in general, it's hard work.
Yeah.
The butterfly song, dragonflies. I can't remember what but he recorded that in his closet at home, and he became an international star. I don't think he's done too much since, but you know, that one song probably has made him enough money to set himself up for life. So, you know, you're only 3 minutes away from superstardom. That's my final thing. And do the music because you love it, not because you want to make money for it.
Mate, thank you very much for your time here. Are you happy to come on for another chat sometime?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful.
I
Maybe
got-
we might
we
even get another
touched.
music person
Maybe I
involved.
might have to write a book.
That would sound why not, mate? The stories you've got, they're the things you have to capture. You know, one of the things I'm trying to do with getting our local stories here in particular is we actually have a rich history on what a lot of people have done in our local industry, but we've never, because it's not LA or London or New York, whatever, or Sydney or Melbourne, a lot of our stories fly under the wire. And people like yourself who's done so many amazing things. I mean, just to have a chat where you tell some of the things you've done that, mate, if you pass this on to a lot of your mates, they won't know a lot of the things you've spoken about tonight that you've done. And, but hey,
Well, you know, it's funny because if I'm in LA, and you know, for a little while I was living in Pink's house. So if I said, "Hey, oh yeah, I'm living in Pink's house in LA," somebody said, "Oh man, next time you see Alicia, tell her I said, hey, you know, da 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 da." And if I say that in Redcliffe, they go, "Ah, you big noter."
yeah, exactly. But that's why this chat is about, so people can actually hear these stories. And it's not to, well, hopefully you can use it to your benefit and everyone else I talk it can use it to their benefit. But it's for people to know that we have these things going on in our local industry, which are really exciting that most people don't hear about. Hopefully through what I'm doing here, chatting to people, we can spread the word around a bit. And in doing that, most of it's about encouraging other artists out there to have a punt. You know,
Good.
we've got everything going against us. So we've got nothing to lose. But if you love what you do and if you love music, we cannot stop punting.
No, 100%. And that's what I'm saying. Do it because you love it. Play to 3 people, play to 1,000 people, play to 10,000 people.
I've done all that for decades now. I was able to raise a family. Kids are grown. They're doing really,
Yep.
really well. I've had some successes literally that no one else in the world has had with my China thing. Did it turn out to massive commercial success? No. But doesn't mean I need to stop now. My goal is to wake up tomorrow and figure out what the next thing I need to do to try. I don't give up. But I don't see anything I've done as being a waste because every day I've got to wake up and do music. And that to me personally, that's my success, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
Scotty,
you know,
thanks for your time, brother. Love you doing that. And wish I'd do this again. Yeah. Thanks, mate.
part 2. Thanks.
Part 2.
See you, folks.